Welcome everyone to the Vintage Metagame Monday for the week of April 20. Before we start, we are 6 weeks away from the NYSE Open, and a friend of mine, David Kaplan, is putting together a vintage war map in New York, May 16th with 15 proxies at 11 a.m. at Hex & Co. Upper West Side. Myself and a few others are going to be there, so if you want to chat and play with us and you are in the area, highly recommend coming. So let's take a look at what transpired this week, starting as per usual with just the finalists. So on Thursday, we had a PO deck and just Jeskai PO for Theolingas beating Lurus Doomsday. On Friday, we had another Jason Manchester deck, a little different than the one we saw 2 weeks ago. This is a deck that I'm going to analyze a little after the fact, so we'll talk a little bit more about it, but it's just kind of like a singleton, the Shockwave special deck beating Sphere Shops in the finals. Then for the first challenge of Saturday, we had Breach beating Oath, and then Saturday's challenge, we had Oath beating Jewel. So let's start by moving everyone to their columns. Go here. Oop. You come here, and you go here. Cool. And so what we see from last week is a clear, faster resurgence for Frog. We had, I believe, 10 decks for it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah. 9 here, and then this Murktide deck that I'm talking about also after the fact. So a big resurgence of Frog decks, not as much PO as maybe we were expecting, especially because with this much Frog, you'd expect PO to start kicking back. But as per seeing more numbers than Frog, and that might be also because of this column over here, we saw 5 Oath of Druids decks, which I was very surprised about, which might be putting kind of like counter pressure on the blue-black Frog decks pulling up. We've also seen a relatively stark decrease on the Jewel and Fleshwrecker decks compared to a couple of weeks ago. A lot less Dredge as well. Remember, we had 2 weeks in a row with 4 Dredge decks in the top 8s. A couple of less initiatives, and then this column also got a little larger. So overall, relatively more stable, with the outlier being, like, for me at least personally, all of these Oath of Druid decks. For these 5, except for one of them, which was the winner has a little bit of a different configuration. So mostly these Oath decks have settled into one Raph main deck, and so Raph and Mikey, and 4 Atraxas with 2 Null Rods in the main, and then 1 more in the sideboard. This version that won was a lot different. It was basically just blue-green with 4 Force of Negations, 4 Force of Wills, and 4 Stock-Ups, whereas these versions here have moved between either 2 Ponders or 2 Stock-Ups, but certainly Bamp, Demonic, and also 2 Thoughtseizes, plus the Null Rods, right? This deck was just on the Forces with Oko. This one was playing 3 Okos, I believe. And so a bit of a interesting move, clearly spec'd to try and beat this combo shops decks, where I think Oath can have some trouble, especially Jewel, even though I believe they beat one in the finals for one of them. And also putting a lot of counter pressure against the Psychic Frog decks. There was also a disappearance, unfortunately. We didn't see many of the white-black aggro Lurus decks that had popped up last week. I myself tried to play one on the Thursday challenge, and I'm going to try to put together a video commenting that run, because I felt like it was a very interesting experience, just seeing how a deck that is just decked for the meta can play. It felt like a deck that would be able to do very well if it faced the right opponents, but has like a lot to be improved on to cover the worst matchups. So yeah, just to finish up, these 2 Doomsday decks, one of them by Suasakat was just a Lurus Doomsday version, and the other one was just the non-Lurus, more like Necro Turbo version. This Jason Manchester deck was basically the Shockwave special with, like, I believe 52 singleton cards. We'll talk about this one a little bit later, as well as this, which Dom put on the top 8. This one was brewed by my group, and it was a flow state deck that just tries to take advantage of bigger creatures and just more selection. We'll also talk about this one in a bit. I wanted to talk a little bit about cards that had come from the Strixhaven release, which was released on Tuesday. Generally, we had basically just flow state making it into the deck with 2 versions of Esper and a concoction that was like Esper with red on the sideboard for Pyroblast and Hexing Squelcher that Alberto put on the finals, on the top 8, sorry. And these 2 plus 1 of the frog decks that Justin and I was playing on Saturday Challenge, and then this bigger blue-black was also playing. And then 1 Petrified Hamlet by CRK in the Fleshwrecker matchup. I believe it came out once, based on what they were mentioning on Discord, that it stopped at Wasteland. I personally don't see it. In fact, I think if there's a deck that could play this, would be maybe the Golo Shops decks, because you can just tutor for it. But again, interesting that people are just trying things out. I didn't see erodes from the initiative deck, which makes sense because you don't want to give them more basics or more mana. And other than that, we haven't seen much impact from the set in Vintage. Still relatively early, and for most of us that play using like rental accounts, sometimes it's just a little bit of a struggle to get the new cards. But other than flow state, it doesn't seem like people are experimenting with anything else. So let's talk a little bit about these 2 decks that I wanted to highlight. The first one being this Esper Singleton deck. As I mentioned, this was playing, I believe, 52 to 53 Singleton cards, so it's going to be a little hard to, analyze it per se, but basically just Esper control of sorts with a ton of Planeswalkers and a couple of combos. So Karn with Mycos and Larius on the sideboard. We also have Narset, Twister, and Time Vault with Tezzeret and, Manifold Key. With some, just your regular tutors, Yogg-Will for more advantage, Balance for the creature matchups, and just overall a potpourri of just powerful cards and some combos here and there. Interesting that the Tinker is in the sideboard, and I believe it's just so that you bring in the Stinker Bloodsteel Colossus against the frog decks, and blue-black specifically, but also probably Initiative. 4 ley lines because you're not the Lurus deck, so you can just play this for the Dredge matchups, and you have 2 more Graveyard Hate, so all of these. This Prismatic Ending, I feel, should just be the 3rd portable hold, but it's still here. We have full Moxen available to us, so also kind of like useful for getting rid of 3s, but I doubt there's many 3s that you would care about, and just a singular Plow. So overall, a pretty interesting version. It's not the first time we see this pop up. And it's kind of like a pretty powerful addition to the roster. We're still not truly seeing like big blue control take up in the meta. And so this is an interesting iteration. We'll see where it goes. Although I believe they haven't made many changes to it since the last time that they were playing challenges. And then the other list, which was concocted by my group on Discord. Multiple players were playing this. I think Matt was also playing a similar list to this one. But ultimately, Dom was the one that got into the top 8. And so here we see just a blue-black frog deck that is trying to be a little bit more selective with 4 flow states and 4 ponders. So the idea here is that you want to take advantage of flow state as a card, and then for that you need to enable it with more sorceries, right? Regular frog actually only has 4 to 6. So if you think of like regular frog, it would have Probe and Time Walk, Demonic, and Twister. Sometimes you play Lorien. You could think of Cruise, but it's unlikely that the Cruise is going to be in the graveyard unless you discard it. So very few sorceries to enable the flow state. So here we're adding, on top of the other 4, so you would see like about 8. And now we're adding 4 Ponders plus the Lorien, which is not usually present, and 2 Thoughtseizes as well to enable it. So, very decent number of sorceries, and also obviously instants. You're never short of them on the frog decks. And then just to make the deck a little bigger, this Murktide Regents over the Bowmasters. And the reason here is just that Murktide is just much better at closing the game against the combo decks, except for Jewel. But Raker, a lot of the times your cards just kind of get stonewalled by the Fleshraker tokens if you even survive to that point. And also just overall not a very fast threat, so this increases the density of just like fast kills, while also using flow state to just recoup and just keep getting more and more disruption. Like we have about 10 counter spells, some conditional, some full on, and then 2 Thoughtseize to continue. And generally you're just trying to kill your opponent very quickly with a sideboard that's relatively tagged for that matchup, with 3 Consigns and a Mindbreak Trap and 3 Null Rods main, all for that. The Leylands we tried because of, you're not a Loros deck, so you want it for the graveyard decks. It felt a little uncomfortable for the ones that I was watching. Just basically like mulliganing very aggressively when you are a deck that has even more need for a critical mass of cards, because flow state needs at least 2 cards in the graveyard that are different types, and so just kind of like hard to make work. But yeah, this was the one we're playing. I know Justin played something similar, although theirs was just pure blue black. And so yeah, this is more or less where we are. In terms of the next weeks, after Secrets of Strixhaven, this is the full card pool we're going to have for NYSE. So expect more attempts at just trying things out and seeing where we land with the cards. Again, MTGO just unmoved this for me. But just to call out these 4 Oath of Druids decks, even with the 2 Null Rod main decks, Oath tends to struggle a lot against a lot of combo. And so if we see a resurgence for this, it might just veer even harder into the control role. Like we saw for this Oath, like the winner of this, without Null Rods, but with 8 main deck forces and a lot of ways to recoup, and just trying to stabilize and win with either Oko or just the typical Oath gameplay. But yeah, overall, we're seeing meta that is shifting a little bit more towards this like control-y decks. When we started this series, this game, this was a lot about asking questions, and now we're getting into a very heavy answer setup, where these, which I would consider mostly control or control adjacent decks, also the PO decks, we see a big swing into the control-y version of decks, some of which have, combo control, like all of these 4. This I would consider more like control combo with like varying degrees of the control slider, and here we have a lot more of the frog decks, which, we'll see how we can exploit this for next week, but this is kind of like where things are moving towards. And yeah, interesting to see where we're gonna go next week. That's all I have for you this week. I'm gonna put at least one more video. I'm gonna try to put one more video of my white-black Loros aggro version, because it's a little different than the video that Justin made. His version was slightly different, and I haven't seen anyone else putting a video for it. I didn't make top 8 with it, but I still think there's good learnings to get from that deck if you're interested in playing it or want to learn more about how to play against it. Maybe I'm gonna also put up a commented run on my Breach run for the challenge. We'll see it. Let me know in the comments if that would be interesting, but we'll see if I can make that happen for this week. Anyway, that's all I have for you today. Again, please show up if you think it's going to be interesting for you to the NYSE qualifier in a couple of weeks here in New York City, and I'll see you there. Take care.